The morning sun barely touched the windows of Riverside Medical Center when Dr. Helena Foster walked through the emergency department doors. At 33 years old, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had fought twice as hard for half the recognition. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her white coat was pressed so crisp it could cut paper. She had exactly one mission: transform this emergency department into the most efficient unit in the state. No distractions. No complications. Certainly no messy workplace drama. "Good morning, everyone," Helena announced as she entered the conference room where her new team waited. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward her, some curious, others cautious. "I'm Dr. Foster, your new emergency department chief. Let me be direct about my expectations." She clicked her remote, and a presentation appeared on the screen behind her. Charts, graphs, efficiency metrics, all color-coded and meticulously organized. "Our response times will improve by 20% within 3 months, she continued, her voice steady and professional. "Our protocols will be followed exactly. Our patient outcomes will be the best in the region." Nurse Rodriguez, a veteran with 20 years in emergency medicine, raised her hand. "Those are ambitious goals, Dr. Foster." "Ambitious implies uncertainty," Helena replied without missing a beat. "I prefer to call them inevitable." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. Helena didn't smile. She wasn't here to be liked, she was here to save lives, the policy that changed everything. Helena advanced her presentation to the final slide. The room went quiet. "One more thing," she said, her gray eyes scanning the faces before her. "I know emergency departments run on adrenaline and close quarters. I know long shifts create bonds. But I want to be crystal clear about something." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "There will be no romantic relationships between staff members in this department. Not on my watch." The silence became uncomfortable. A few residents exchanged glances. Someone coughed. "I've seen brilliant doctors compromise their judgment for personal feelings," Helena continued, her voice softer but no less firm. "I've seen careers destroyed by workplace relationships. I've seen patients suffer because two people couldn't keep their personal lives separate from professional duties." What she didn't say was that she'd been that doctor once. That she'd trusted the wrong person, let her guard down, and watched her reputation nearly crumble because of it. That she'd sworn never to let emotion cloud her medical judgment again. "This isn't about being cold," she explained. "It's about being excellent. If you can't commit to that standard, I suggest you request a transfer now." "Any questions?" No one spoke. "Good. Let's get to work." The clumsy genius. 3 hours later, Helena was reviewing patient charts in her new office when someone knocked on her door. "Come in," she called without looking up. "Dr. Foster?" "Hi, I'm James Rivera. I'm starting my rotation in emergency medicine today." Helena glanced up and saw a young resident with warm brown eyes and an easy smile. His dark hair was slightly messy, like he'd been running his fingers through it. He held a steaming coffee cup in one hand and his stethoscope in the other, and somehow he looked both nervous and comfortable at the same time. "Welcome to emergency medicine, Dr. Rivera," Helena said, her tone professional. "I assume you heard my policy presentation this morning?" "Every word," James replied, his smile growing slightly. "No romance, maximum efficiency, inevitable excellence." "Got it." There was something in his tone, not mockery exactly, but a gentle playfulness that made Helena narrow her eyes slightly. "You find something amusing, Dr. Rivera?" "No, ma'am, I mean, Dr. Foster," he said quickly. "I just think it's refreshing to work for someone who's so clear about their expectations. Most people dance around the difficult topics." Helena studied him for a moment. He seemed genuine, if a bit too relaxed for someone's first day. "There's a possible appendicitis in exam room 4, she said, turning back to her computer. "Go evaluate the patient and report back to me." Absolutely. And if you need anything, coffee, maybe? Though I see you have water, Dr. Rivera. Right. Exam room 4. On it. He disappeared, and Helena found herself shaking her head slightly. The resident was going to be trouble, she could tell. Too friendly, too casual. She'd need to keep an eye on him. When everything changed, 4 days passed in a blur of patients, protocols, and endless coffee. Helena barely slept, determined to prove herself in her new position. She arrived before everyone else and left after they'd gone. Her reputation for perfection was well earned, and she intended to maintain it. On Thursday afternoon, Helena was rushing down the corridor from a meeting with hospital administration. She was reviewing patient files on her tablet, mentally calculating how to reduce wait times in the pediatric section. Her mind was 3 steps ahead of her feet. She turned the corner at full speed. James was coming from the opposite direction, equally distracted. He'd just bought the largest coffee the cafeteria sold, a triple-shot Americano that could wake the dead. He was reading a patient's lab results on his phone, his brow furrowed in concentration. They collided at the exact center of the intersection. Time seemed to slow down. Helena's tablet went flying. James's coffee cup launched into the air in a perfect arc, spinning end over end. For one frozen moment, they locked eyes, her gray ones wide with surprise, his brown ones filled with horror. Then physics took over. The coffee achieved maximum altitude and began its descent. James tried to catch it, but his hands were full. Helena tried to step back, but her feet tangled with his. The cup hit the edge of James's elbow, and its entire contents, hot, dark, and catastrophic, splashed directly across Helena's pristine white coat. The liquid was scalding. Helena gasped as it soaked through her coat, her scrubs, everything. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," James stammered, dropping his phone. "Dr. Foster, I'm so sorry." His stethoscope, which had been hanging loosely around his neck, somehow hooked onto the clipboard Helena had been carrying. When he stumbled backward, the stethoscope yanked the clipboard from her hands, sending papers scattering across the hallway like oversized confetti. Helena stood frozen, dripping with coffee. Her coat was ruined. Her dignity was somewhere on the floor with the scattered papers. And standing in front of her, looking absolutely mortified, was James Rivera, the unexpected spark. "I am so incredibly sorry," James said, grabbing napkins from a nearby dispenser. He moved toward her, clearly intending to help clean up the mess. "Don't touch me," Helena snapped, but there was something in her voice beyond anger. Embarrassment, maybe. Vulnerability. She looked down at herself. The coffee had created a massive brown stain that covered most of her torso. Drops were falling from her coat onto the floor. Her carefully maintained professional appearance was completely destroyed. "Dr. Foster, please, let me help." James reached out again. Their eyes met, and something strange happened. Instead of the fury she expected to feel, Helena found herself noticing things she shouldn't. The genuine concern in James's expression. The way his hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the desire to fix what he'd broken. The warmth in his eyes that remained even through his obvious panic. "You're a walking disaster," she said, but her voice had lost its sharp edge. "Only around you, apparently," James replied before he could stop himself. The words hung in the air between them. Helena's eyes widened slightly. James looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "What I mean is," he started. "I know what you meant, Dr. Rivera," Helena interrupted. She took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. "Go to the supply closet. Bring me towels and a new coat. Then get back to work." "Yes, Dr. Foster." He hurried away, leaving Helena standing alone in the hallway, coffee-soaked and thoroughly confused. Because for just a moment, one tiny, impossible moment, she'd felt something other than annoyance. She'd felt interested, and that, Helena realized as she walked toward her office leaving a trail of coffee drops, was far more dangerous than any workplace policy violation. The alarm that shattered the emergency department's routine was loud enough to wake the dead. 3 short blasts followed by a long continuous wail, the signal every medical professional dreaded and prepared for. Mass casualty incident. Nurse Rodriguez's voice boomed through the intercom. Highway pileup, 15 vehicles involved. Multiple critical patients incoming. All available staff report immediately. Helena burst from her office, her personal drama forgotten. She'd changed into fresh scrubs after the coffee incident, and now her mind shifted into the sharp focus that had made her legendary at her previous hospital. This was what she lived for, the moments when medicine became a race against time. "Listen up," she commanded, her voice cutting through the rising chaos. The emergency department went silent. "We have 6 minutes before the first ambulance arrives. Dr. Rivera, Dr. Patel, you take Trauma Bay 1. Dr. Santos, you're with me in Bay 2. Nurse Rodriguez, set up triage at the entrance. We need." The doors burst open early. A paramedic team rushed in, pushing a gurney at a near run. "Couldn't wait," the lead paramedic gasped. 30-year-old male, steering wheel impact to chest, BP dropping fast. The next 20 minutes became a controlled hurricane. Ambulances arrived one after another, each bringing broken bodies and desperate stories. A grandmother who'd been driving her grandchildren to school. A businessman who'd been on a conference call. A teenage boy who'd been changing the radio station. All of them now fighting for their lives in Helena's emergency department. Helena moved between trauma bays like a general commanding troops. Her gray eyes missed nothing, a monitor beeping irregularly, a nurse struggling with an 4-line, a resident freezing under pressure. "Dr. Santos, less talking, more cutting," she barked. "That chest tube isn't going to place itself." In Trauma Bay 1, James was working on a middle-aged woman with multiple injuries. Helena observed him for a moment from the doorway, ready to intervene if needed. But James moved with surprising grace, his earlier clumsiness completely absent. His hands were steady as he sutured. His voice was calm as he directed the nurses. This was a different person from the one who'd dumped coffee all over her, the puzzle no one else saw, Dr. Foster. Dr. Patel called from Trauma Bay 3, panic creeping into his usually confident voice. "I need you here now." Helena rushed over. On the gurney lay a man in his 50s, ashen-faced and deteriorating rapidly. His blood pressure was plummeting despite 2 4-lines running wide open. "What do we have?" Helena demanded. "Possible internal bleeding," Patel said, his words coming fast. "Abdominal injury, I think. But I can't find the source. His belly's rigid, but the ultrasound isn't showing free fluid. I've already called for a surgical consult, but," the monitor alarmed. "Blood pressure, 70/40. The man's lips were turning blue. "We don't have time for a consult," Helena said, moving to examine the patient herself. She pressed on his abdomen, checked his pupils, listened to his heart sounds. Something wasn't adding up, but she couldn't identify what. James appeared at the doorway, his own patient stabilized. He glanced at the monitor, then at the patient, and his expression shifted subtly. "May I?" he asked quietly. Helena wanted to say no. This was her case, her decision, her responsibility. But something in James's tone made her hesitate. It wasn't arrogance or a desire to show off. It was the sound of someone who'd seen something important. "Quickly," she said, stepping aside. James approached the patient, but instead of examining his abdomen like everyone else had, he looked at the man's neck. His fingers gently felt along the jugular veins. "His neck veins are distended," James murmured, more to himself than anyone else. He grabbed a stethoscope and listened to the patient's heart, his eyes closing in concentration. Heart sounds are muffled. "Dr. Rivera, we know he has an abdominal," Patel started. "It's not his abdomen," James interrupted, his voice suddenly urgent. "Dr. Foster, I think this is cardiac tamponade." The room went silent. Cardiac tamponade, blood accumulating in the sac around the heart, compressing it, preventing it from beating effectively. If James was right, every second they'd spent looking at the abdomen had been wasted time. If he was wrong, they'd be pursuing the wrong diagnosis while the patient bled out internally. Helena's mind raced. She looked at the patient again, this time through the lens of James's suggestion. Distended neck veins despite low blood pressure, yes. Muffled heart sounds, she'd thought that was just the noise of the trauma bay. Falling blood pressure that wasn't responding to fluids, classic for tamponade. Beck's triad, she said softly, almost to herself. The 3 signs of cardiac tamponade, right there in front of them. How had she missed it? We need to do a pericardiocentesis, James said. Now. Helena met his eyes. In them, she saw no triumph, no ego. Just a desperate desire to save a life and a quiet confidence that he was right. Prepare for emergency pericardiocentesis, Helena ordered. Dr. Rivera, you're primary. I'm supervising. The nurses moved with practiced efficiency. Within 90 seconds, James had the ultrasound probe positioned over the patient's chest, the long needle ready in his other hand. His hands, those same hands that had catastrophically spilled coffee just days ago, were perfectly steady. Visualizing the heart now, James narrated, his eyes locked on the ultrasound screen. There's the effusion. It's large, compressing the right ventricle. Advancing the needle, now. Helena watched the screen intently. James's needle moved with millimeter precision, advancing through tissue toward the pericardial sac. One wrong move could puncture the heart itself. Too cautious, and the patient would die before they reached the blood. Almost there, James breathed. And, we're in. Dark blood rushed into the syringe. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The patient's blood pressure began climbing, 80/50, 90/55, 100/60. His lips started regaining color. The monitor's alarming stopped. That's it, Helena said quietly. Well done, Dr. Rivera. The trauma bay erupted in relieved activity. Patel was already calling the surgical team to take the patient to the operating room for definitive repair. Nurse Rodriguez was updating the blood bank. But Helena stood still for a moment, watching James carefully remove the needle and secure the catheter. He'd just saved a life that everyone else, including her, had been about to lose. Seeing him differently 2 hours later, when the last of the critical patients had been stabilized or transferred to surgery, Helena found James in the staff lounge. He was sitting alone, still in his blood-stained scrubs, holding a cup of coffee that he wasn't drinking. He looked exhausted. Dr. Rivera. James looked up, and Helena saw something flicker across his face, nervousness, maybe, or anticipation. Dr. Foster. How's the patient? In surgery. They confirmed the cardiac injury. If we'd continued treating him for abdominal bleeding. She didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what would have happened. I'm glad I spoke up, James said quietly. I almost didn't. Cardiac tamponade isn't usually the first thing you think of in a car accident. What made you consider it? James was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. My first year of residency, I missed a similar case. The patient died while I was busy looking for bleeding that wasn't there. My attending told me afterward that medicine isn't about following the obvious path, it's about seeing what others miss. I've never forgotten that. Helena sat down across from him, something she wouldn't normally do. The professional distance she maintained so carefully felt less important than understanding this person who'd just proven himself brilliant. You were a different person in that trauma bay, she said. The clumsy resident who destroyed my coat disappeared. A small smile crossed James's face. I'm only clumsy around certain people. Meaning? Meaning when I'm nervous, he admitted. And you make me nervous, Dr. Foster. Helena should have stood up right then. Should have reminded him of her policy, of professional boundaries, of all the reasons this conversation was inappropriate. Instead, she found herself asking, why? James met her eyes, and Helena saw something in them that made her breath catch. Not just respect or professional admiration. Something warmer, something genuine. "Because you're exactly the kind of doctor I want to become," he said. "Brilliant, dedicated, uncompromising. And because..." He hesitated, then continued, "because from the moment we collided in that hallway, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you." The word hung in the air like a grenade. Helena felt something crack inside her chest. "You don't love me," she said, but her voice shook. "You barely know me. I know that you arrived 2 hours before everyone else because you're terrified of failing. I know you drink your coffee black with exactly 1 sugar cube. I know you have a photo of a golden retriever hidden in your desk drawer, probably a pet from childhood that you still miss. I know you're hardest on the residents who show the most promise because you want them to be great. And I know that beneath all that armor, you're just scared." Helena felt tears threatening, which was ridiculous. She didn't cry. She was the Iron Chief, the perfectionist, the woman who chose excellence over emotion every single time. "Scared of what?" she whispered. James moved around the desk, slowly, giving her time to step away. She didn't. He stopped inches from her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Scared that if you let yourself be human, if you let yourself feel, you'll lose everything you've worked for," he said softly. "But Helena, you're not losing anything by letting someone care about you. You're gaining everything." A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. James reached up slowly, telegraphing his intention, and gently wiped it away with his thumb. "I can't," Helena said, but she didn't move away from his touch. "If this goes wrong, then we'll handle it like the professionals we are," James said. "But what if it goes right? What if you let yourself have this one thing that's just for you, not for your career or your reputation or anyone else's expectations?" Helena closed her eyes. In her mind, she saw all the reasons to say no, the policy she'd created, the judgment from colleagues, the risk to everything she'd built. But she also saw something else, a life spent so focused on being perfect that she forgot to be happy. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered. "Probably the worst," James agreed, his smile audible in his voice. "If anyone finds out, we'll be discreet. If it affects our work, it won't. I promise you, I will be more professional than anyone else in this hospital." Helena opened her eyes and found James looking at her with such tenderness that her final defenses crumbled. "You spilled coffee all over me," she said, and suddenly she was laughing through her tears. "Our first interaction, and you completely destroyed my coat." "I know," James laughed too, the tension breaking like clouds after a storm. "I'm still mortified about that." "You should be. It was expensive. I'll buy you a new one. It's the principle of the matter." They were both laughing now, standing close in her office with the door still open, the professional distance that had kept them apart finally closing. "Helena," James said, his voice going serious again. "I need to hear you say it. I need to know this isn't just me." She took a deep breath, making the choice that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. "It's not just you," she admitted. "I've been trying not to feel this way since the moment you walked into my office with that ridiculous smile. You're charming and brilliant and completely frustrating, and I..." She paused, gathering courage. "I think about you constantly." James's smile could have lit up the entire hospital. "Yeah. Yes. And I'm absolutely terrified." "Me too," he said. "But maybe we can be terrified together?" Helena laughed again, the sound lighter than she'd felt in years. "That's the worst romantic proposition I've ever heard. I'll work on it. Give me time." And then, in her office at midnight with the emergency department humming with life beyond her door, Helena Foster did something she never thought she'd do. She closed the distance between them and kissed James Rivera. It was soft and tentative at first, both of them testing this new territory. But then James's arms came around her waist, gentle but sure, and Helena let herself sink into the embrace. The kiss deepened, months of tension and denial finally finding release. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, James rested his forehead against hers. "So," he said, "about that no-romance policy." Helena laughed, truly laughed, for the first time in longer than she could remember. "It was a stupid policy anyway." "Really?" "No," she admitted. "It was a smart policy for very good reasons. But sometimes." She looked up at him, seeing her future in those warm brown eyes. "Sometimes the best things in life are the ones we don't plan for." "Like coffee collisions?" "Exactly like coffee collisions." 6 months later. The emergency department hummed with its usual controlled chaos. Dr. Helena Foster moved between trauma bays with her characteristic precision, but those who knew her well noticed. The confession hung in the air between them. Helena's heart was beating faster than it should. This was exactly the situation she'd created her policy to prevent. She should shut this down immediately. "Dr. Rivera." "James." "Call me James." "That wouldn't be appropriate." "None of this is appropriate," James said softly. "But it's true anyway." Helena stood up abruptly. "Your performance today was exceptional. But this conversation is over. We have professional boundaries for good reasons, and I intend to maintain them." She walked toward the door, her mind a chaos of conflicting emotions. She'd spent years building walls to protect her career, her reputation, her heart. She wasn't going to let one charming resident with warm brown eyes knock them down. At the doorway, she paused without turning around. "James," she said quietly, using his first name before she could stop herself. "That was excellent medicine today. Really excellent." She left before he could respond, but she felt his smile even without seeing it. And as Helena walked back to her office, she realized something terrifying. Her rules were about to be tested in ways she'd never anticipated. 3 weeks passed like a fever dream. Helena threw herself into work with even more intensity than usual, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened whenever James entered a room. She was perfectly professional, cold, even, but her eyes betrayed her, seeking him out in the chaos of the emergency department. James, for his part, was patient. He didn't push, didn't flirt openly, didn't do anything that could be called inappropriate. But he was there, consistently excellent, quietly supportive, always seeming to appear when she needed an extra pair of skilled hands. It was driving her crazy. "You're doing it again," Nurse Rodriguez said one evening, catching Helena staring at James as he explained a procedure to a medical student. "Doing what?" Helena asked, snapping her attention back to the chart she was reviewing. "That thing where you pretend you're not watching Dr. Rivera while very obviously watching Dr. Rivera. I'm evaluating his teaching technique." Rodriguez laughed, the sound warm and knowing. "Honey, I've been a nurse for 23 years. I know the difference between professional evaluation and personal interest. And that," she nodded toward James, "is definitely personal interest." "It's inappropriate," Helena said firmly. "Maybe. But it's also human." Helena didn't respond. She couldn't, because Rodriguez was right, and that terrified her. The night everything changed. The crisis came on a quiet Tuesday night. Helena was working late, as usual, reviewing protocols in her office. Most of the staff had gone home, leaving the emergency department in the hands of the night shift. She should have been tired, but sleep felt impossible lately. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw James's face, his concentration during that life-saving procedure, his gentle smile when he thought no one was watching, the warmth in his eyes when they accidentally met hers. A knock on her door startled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting one of the night nurses. James entered, still in his scrubs, looking uncertain. "Dr. Foster. I'm sorry to bother you so late. I wanted to review that patient's labs from this morning before I left, and I saw your light still on." Helena glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. "You're still here?" "Could ask you the same question," James replied with a small smile. They stood in silence for a moment, the office suddenly feeling much smaller than usual. Helena could hear her own heartbeat, loud and insistent. "Was there something else?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. James took a breath, seeming to make a decision. "Actually, yes. I need to say something, and I know it's going to make you uncomfortable, but I can't keep working here without being honest." Helena felt her defenses rising. "Dr. Rivera. Please, just let me finish," he interrupted gently. "I know about your policy. I understand why you have it. And I respect that you're my superior and that this could complicate everything. But Helena," he used her first name, and it sounded like music. "I can't pretend I don't feel this anymore." "Feel what?" she asked, though she knew exactly what he meant. "This connection between us. You feel it too. I see it in the way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. The way you soften just slightly when I walk into a room. The way you said my name that day in the lounge." Helena stood up, putting her desk between them like a barrier. "Even if what you're saying were true, and I'm not confirming that it is, it doesn't matter. I built my career by being above reproach. I won't compromise that for feelings. For love," James said quietly. "Something different." The Iron Chief was still brilliant, still demanding excellence, still the best emergency medicine doctor in 3 states. But now she smiled more. She laughed occasionally. And when Dr. James Rivera entered a room, her eyes lit up in a way that had nothing to do with medicine. They were careful, professional at work, never showing favoritism, maintaining the boundaries that kept the department running smoothly. But after shifts, they'd meet at her apartment or his, trading stories of their days, cooking dinner together, building something real. Nurse Rodriguez noticed, of course. She noticed everything. But she also noticed that Helena seemed happier, lighter, more human. And James had become an even better doctor, his confidence growing under Helena's mentorship and care. One evening, as they were leaving the hospital together, carefully timed to be casual, coincidental, James slipped his hand into Helena's for just a moment. "Happy?" he asked quietly. Helena thought about her answer. She thought about all the rules she'd broken, the risks she'd taken, the walls she'd let crumble. She thought about how terrified she'd been and how completely it had been worth it. "Incredibly," she said, squeezing his hand before letting go as they approached the parking lot where colleagues might see. "You? I spilled coffee on you and won your heart," James said with that smile that still made her stomach flip. "I'm the luckiest man alive." "You're ridiculous. You love it." Helena laughed, not bothering to deny it. "I really do." As they walked to their separate cars, maintaining appearances, Helena reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them here. She'd created rules to protect herself from pain, from vulnerability, from the messiness of human emotion. But life, she'd learned, had no respect for rules. Sometimes the best moments came from the collisions you never saw coming. Sometimes the people who changed your life were the ones who literally crashed into it. And sometimes, the bravest thing you could do was let someone love you. Helena drove home with a smile on her face, knowing that James would arrive 20 minutes later with takeout and that terrible movie he'd been wanting to watch. Knowing that she'd pretend to hate his choice while secretly enjoying every minute. Knowing that she'd fallen completely, hopelessly in love with the clumsy resident who'd ruined her coat and stolen her heart. It had started with chaos. But it had become the most beautiful thing in her life. And Helena Foster, who had built her entire career on control and precision, had learned to embrace the beautiful mess of falling in love.